The term generational is one of the most overused words in sports, but let's get into it with the Detroit Pistons. Is Cade Cunningham considered a generational player? Let's talk about it inside right here on Top Title Detroit. Let's go.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
What's good? Welcome to Top Title Detroit. I am Eric Vincent, your host and Detroit Pistons beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you for being here. Before we get going on the video, make sure you please help us grow the channel by liking the video and subscribing to the channel as well. Getting closer and closer to 500 subscribers on the channel, and I really think we can make that happen soon. So please tell a friend to lock in with us right here at Top Title Detroit. I would really appreciate that. Again, thank you all for being here. I know I've been away for a little while. Did some moving, still working on that at the moment. So you will see a new setup here very, very soon. Either way, thank you all for tuning in. Let's get into the conversation about one of the most overused words in sports now, generational. Everybody uses that damn word, and it seems like it's just being used out of context. Shout out to Ryan Clark. He was on First Take where he was discussing Archie Manning from Texas, where people have called him constantly a generational prospect. He's obviously the brother of Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, the son of, I think Archie was the name of his father as well, if I'm not mistaken. So he has that lineage of greatness as a quarterback in his blood already. And people have already overhyped and called him generational, even with just being his first week in college football. So I can't help but think and kind of want to have the conversation, at least in terms of our content with the Pistons and Detroit sports. When you look at a player like Cade Cunningham, somebody who had a lot of attention his way before the 2021 draft, coming in from Montverde, being a very, prolific standout player when he was at Oklahoma State, and coming into the draft, there were so many teams and so many fan bases that were maneuvering and tanking to get Cade the best they could. We heard it from the Rockets. We saw it from the Thunder fan base, the Raptors, the Cavaliers, and even the Detroit Pistons. Everybody wanted the services of Cade Cunningham on their team. And now I can't help but wonder on the conversation, is Cade Cunningham considered a generational player? Not even just generational player, because I want to emphasize and actually pay attention to the detail of what Ryan Clark said in the discussion. He said that Archie was not a generational talent. That is an important distinction between the two. Being generational and being a generational talent is not the same thing, because he got a lot of pushback by saying Peyton Manning's not a generational talent. Tom Brady's not a generational talent. Drew Brees is not a generational talent. And then the same thing for Archie Manning. I can understand his reasoning for that because I don't look at them as generational players either. My definition, again, this is my definition. You want to tear me up in the comments, do what you got to do. I was talking about this on social media. My definition of the term generational talent means you have a skill set that is so unique amongst your field or your class that you are looked at as a rare commodity in terms of sports. So when you look at players like Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson in terms of their mobility, that unique skill set makes them generational because it's not a lot of players around their class now that have that same skill set along with success to go along with it. If you look at players like maybe even Patrick Mahomes, who may not have the electricity of a guy like Lamar Jackson in terms of mobility, his ability to improv, his arm strength, his talent just as a quarterback in general, on top of his inflated numbers, his ability to be an MVP this first year, going to a Super Bowl, 4 times, if I'm not mistaken, in the first 5 years of his career. Like, he's had a very decorated career. So I would consider that generational. You can even look at guys like Shohei Ohtani, a guy that's a pitcher and a hitter in baseball, and he's phenomenal at both. Travis Hunter, he played at Jackson State, Colorado, and now the Jacksonville Jaguars as a cornerback and a wide receiver like Deion Sanders did. Obviously a generational talent for, reasons that don't need to be explained. He would be considered generational. So if I'm looking at Cade Cunningham, and even the term generational can be kind of, loose in terms of its definition, because in terms of just living as a human, you can consider a generation's worth of time probably like 20 years or 30 years in terms of like millennials to Gen Zers or the boomer. Like it's just different times in terms of living. But in sports, it's got a different timeline. I consider generational gaps around 3 to 5 years. For me personally, that's how I look at it. So if you're looking at a player like a guy like Cade Cunningham, who came into the league extremely polished. I think he's been the most polished prospect in the NBA, honestly, since LeBron James. And I don't think that's a stretch if you look at how Cade played from Montverde to Oklahoma State and even with what he's doing now. He's not a perfect player, but he was as close to a perfect prospect that you could ask for coming into the league because he didn't have a lot of major flaws in his game. So if you don't have a lot of major flaws, that doesn't mean you're not perfect or you're perfect, but it means that, like, for example, Cade came in, he was a really good 3-point shooter, but even if you look at him now where he's kind of, iffy as a 3-point shooter, it's not a crippling flaw to where it drastically limits his game or the Pistons' ability to win. So that's the difference between it for me. And if you look at a guy like Cade, I think it's fair to kind of give him that generational label. I think he's earned it, and I think he's shown it from where he started high school, where he was leading an undefeated All-American team that had talent from, top to bottom in Montverde, where they went undefeated and smacked everybody by an average of 30 points. That's a fact. Going to Oklahoma State, kind of carrying them to a NCAA tournament bid and showing that he is the consensus #1 overall prospect heading into the NBA. That warrants a generational talent. And again, his ability to play defense at a high level, his ability to be a playmaker at a high level. We've seen him over time now evolve to be one of the 3, maybe 5 best passers in all of basketball. He finished top 10 in scoring last season, averaging 26 points a game. Like, Cade has done a lot that shows that he is worthy of that stamp, in my opinion. Again, the word gets tossed around a lot because I think people are just kind of losing the definition of the meaning. So if you want to take Cade's game and the generational aspect of it, it's not a whole lot of players that have come out of the league or into the league as a damn near perfect prospect. Like, you can rely on Cade to be able to do anything. Hey, Cade, we really need you to score tonight and, fill it up to release 20 to 30. All right, I can do that. We also need you to kind of be a playmaker, Cade. We don't really have a whole lot of guys that can set up on their own with Jaden Ivey being hurt. Asar kind of still coming to his own. Can you help play, make it, set these guys up? Yeah, no problem. I can do that. All right, can you also help us out with rebounding? Yeah, I can do that too. All right, can you help guard maybe the first or second or third best scorer on the team as well? Yeah, no problem. I can do that as well. Okay, no problem, Cade. One more thing. We also need you to step in and be a leader as well. This is a young franchise. It's a team that's hitting reset for the umpteenth millionth time, and we really need you to help give that extra sense of leadership that the guys could use to, move into this transition a little bit smoother. Cade has answered all of those calls seamlessly. Again, that doesn't make him a perfect player, but in terms of being generational with what's been asked of him, I think he's answered the bell, especially going into a pro level. I said I think he's been the most polished prospect since LeBron. If you look at some other guys before him, like, that may be considered generational, like people maybe would call Zion generational. I don't know if I'd say he was a generational prospect. He was really exciting. If other people look at him that way, I get it. I personally don't, but I understand why others may. But he didn't have the most polished offensive game coming into the league. He was really known for his dunking, his athleticism, his finishing at the rim, and all of that was generational. I will give him that. If you want to say that makes him generational, cool. I'm not mad at that because of the skill set, because of how his body is built. I can understand that being your definition. Even guys like, people might laugh when I say this, you could argue that Ben Simmons was a generational prospect coming out of college, where he was from. Well, he came from Montverde, if I'm not mistaken, too, right? Yeah. He came up from Montverde, went to LSU, and balled out and looked like he was going to be the left-handed LeBron. And again, he was a guy that could pass, he could score, he played great defense, he did everything that you could ask for, and the Sixers were ready to build around him as one of their key foundation pieces, in the middle of their process that they were going with. So again, you could argue that he was that coming out of college, But after that, he was not generational anymore for obvious reasons. Cade Cunningham, however, I think who has gotten better and better and better every year of his NBA career. You could say that Cade is a generational player. Like there's other guys that are around him, like Luka, who I think is a generational scorer, um, really good playmaker. But I don't know if I would necessarily call Luka generational. You can maybe argue that he is because he was a European guard that came into the league, and it's not a lot of European guards who can play the way he plays. So he earns that stamp. I understand that. But then if you look at Cade again, it's not a whole lot of other guys that fit his mold. He came in as a big body guard that can do everything. That's not an easy commodity to have. When LeBron came into the league, he was a 6'9" forward that was asked to do everything. And he did that. He helped lift him to wins. He helped be a leader. He helped be a face of the franchise. You know, his game expanded over time as a scorer, as a defender, as a playmaker. He expanded a lot of his game, and so has Cade Cunningham. And the way you look at him play, especially considering he hasn't had the most lucrative roster around him, where it's not flooded with veterans and stars and these decorated players that automatically you can assume can equal to winning. Like LeBron has been somewhat spoiled up in his career, maybe not dating back to the Cavalier days, even though he did have talent. He hasn't always had this exorbitant amount of talent that like Cade does. Cade doesn't have that. LeBron did for a good portion of his career. Going to Miami, playing with D Wade and Chris Bosh, and having Ray Allen come off the bench, and having all these other veterans, and having Shane Battier and all these other guys that could kind of make life a little easier for him. Even though still with all that, he was still served as a generational talent, rightfully so. Cade Cunningham has not had that. He's had a lot of guys that are mad young, that are still learning what it means to succeed in the game. And then even when you bring in the veterans that he's had, like a Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., again, I've talked about this a lot. These aren't players that have been just revered as these amazing, role players. They're good and they're respected, but it still was a point of time where they were kind of shooed off as like outcasts to an extent, especially a guy like Tobias Harris off of the contract he had with the Sixers and how people treated him. So Cade has, again, with also playing with 3 coaches in his career, 2 different front offices as well, he's had a lot of turmoil to deal with. And I feel like, considering what his production has been as one of the best scorers in basketball, one of the best playmakers in basketball, a budding defender, and one of the best leaders in the game as well, I think it's safe to say that Cade came into the league as a generational player because there's not a whole lot of other guys around him in his era that were as polished as he was. Again, if you want to call Luka that, that's fine. The difference between Luka and Cade is Luka don't play no defense. Luka gets hunted out by his opponents. That's the difference. Now, again, because he's European and he plays a unbelievable brand offensively, I'll allow it. You can say the same thing for a guy like Joker, a center who was orchestrating offenses and playing this level that we've never really seen a big play. We've seen bigs be able to pass, but we've never seen bigs be able to bring the ball up the floor, make no looks, be a great ball handler, and basically orchestrate an offense from the top of the key as basically their quarterback of the team. We've never seen anything like that. And he's translated it to a finals ring, as well as a finals MVP trophy and 3 MVPs of the regular season as well. He's easily a generational talent. And I think Cade, again, still fits in that mold as well because of how well-rounded he was coming into the league. Again, I understand the word gets thrown out a lot, but I think there are instances and players that it applies to. I think it's people it doesn't apply to. If you ask me, like when people are calling Evan Mobley a generational defender, I couldn't stand it. I still don't like it because he's a very good defender, but calling him generational is too much in my opinion. That does not make him a generational defender because he switches 1 through 5. There are plenty of other guys who switch 1 through 5. Bam Adebayo switches 1 through 5. Draymond switches 1 through 5. It's a lot of other bigs who can defend 1 through 5. Isaiah Stewart, who was drafted a couple years before Evan Mobley was, he can defend 1 through 5. There's nothing really unique about that. Just because he's very good at it doesn't mean it's generational. Doesn't make him a generational talent because of it. It's not the same thing. Now, if you look at a guy like Victor Wembanyama, again, we're still talking about Evan Mobley. Victor Wembanyama was drafted 2 years after Evan Mobley did. And Evan Mobley has already been lapped by Victor Wembanyama. So how can you be a generational player if you have someone come in right after you and already lap you in his first 2 years, especially on a condensed time as well, because he's been hurt a lot in his first 2 years. And he's missed the playoffs, and people are still not questioning whether he's generational or not. Wemby is a whole alien, and he's proven it and verified it in many different ways. It's a very overused term, but I do think it can apply in some certain areas based on how they were as a player coming into the league or how they develop in a short couple of years in that processing. Like, I don't think it applies for a guy like Tom Brady, who was a game manager for his first few seasons and then took 5 to 10 years to develop to what we've seen him to become now, which is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. What stands out and separates him is his winning, those fourth quarter comebacks that the team puts together. The individual skill set of Tom Brady is not something that's wildly heralded. It's not to say that he never had a good arm or wasn't accurate or didn't have physical traits that made him special, but what really separates him is his achievements and his accomplishments in terms of a team setting. That's not being a generational talent. You have to have something different that makes you what you are. Kevin Durant, generational talent, 7 foot forward that can handle like a 2 guard and score and shoot like a guard. That's generational. LeBron's ability as a 6'9" forward to be a point guard, essentially, basically like a more hyper athletic Magic Johnson who can also score. That's generational. Kobe and Mike, they were both generational for what they did because at the time there were no other guys like them who were producing as early as they did. Those guys are generational. I think Cade Cunningham fits in that conversation. I don't think that's unfair. I think he's earned that and proved that up to this point if you've been paying attention to his game. I know we have. We've been watching him, but if you're a casual that doesn't see it, you may give some pushback. But if you're watching Cade Cunningham of the Detroit Pistons, he is 100% worthy of being called a generational talent. But again, that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Would you consider Cade Cunningham a generational talent with the Detroit Pistons? Talk to me in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Again, please make sure you like the video as well. I may have a write-up coming up soon on clutchpoints.com. Please feel free to check it out on there and lock in with us on our site. Please, I really appreciate it on there. You can also follow me on my social media as well. Again, that's where this whole conversation started. Follow me at I am Eric Vincent. We can have a conversation there as well. Thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate y'all for being here. I'm going to expand my content a little bit more as we get closer and closer to the Pistons season. Football right around the corner as well. We go get into a lot of that. And I'm going to see you again soon right here on Top Title Detroit. Peace.